And we are live.
And we are live for another episode of the Contrarian Daily. I hope you are well. I'm here with two awesome young lads, Jake and Chris. How are we doing, boys?
Excellent, mate. Can never complain in your company. How are you, Chris?
Speak for yourself, mate. I'm always complaining in Andy's company, as he knows. So
I was talking about you.
very well, mate. How are you going there?
No, we are good. We are good. There's a lot happening in the world. There's a lot happening in the world yet again. It feels like it's just nonstop. We've got, of course, we've had the pandemic. We've got crazy floods up our way in Queensland at the moment, New South Wales, and we have a literal close to global war happening in Ukraine right now. So there is a lot taking place, and that's why we selected this guest specifically tonight, because she's been all over these topics in such a deep way. I'm actually really, really excited to get her on and have another chat. Always enjoy our chats. And it is none other than Maria Zeee from Zeee Media. Welcome to the Contrarian Daily.
Thank you so much for having me, Andy and gentlemen. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time and good to be here.
Awesome.
It's our pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. And as always, I know I say this to you a lot, and I pump your tires up a lot, Maria. But
you do. You
You love it though, don't you? I'm very good at it. But your interviews are top notch. So again, anyone watching, you've got to get over and watch some of these interviews. I don't know where the F you find these people. It's crazy. Some of the people that you've interviewed and come up with, but it is super engaging and gives some really good insights into what's happening in the unknown side of things. And I don't know about you boys, but I've got a lot of questions that I want to ask tonight about a range of topics. I mean, you've been speaking a lot about the war in Ukraine, cyber attacks, and things that are going to be happening in the future. So, look, we're excited to have you on. And I guess why don't we start with the war in Ukraine? You've been doing a lot of interviews at the moment about that, and you've been speaking to the Aussie Cossack and hearing both sides of the story. What's your current thoughts on the state of Ukraine?
It's very important to hear both sides of the story because the mainstream is really only presenting one side as usual. And like with most people, as soon as something's censored, I gravitate towards the censored content. So all of the Russian channels that have been censored, you best believe I'm following and seeing what they have to say, not necessarily agreeing immediately. But I think what we've seen is a clear propaganda campaign to fully support Ukraine from the mainstream, shut down anything coming out of Russia. There's also been, but I won't deny that there has been fake imagery, fake news coming out of both places. There's been, videos of Ukraine soldiers taken captive by Russians, and then we saw that wasn't actually the case. So it's a time where we really have to remain vigilant and not go with every single thing that we have initially seen. Yep. The one thing that was interesting was that there was a particular person on Twitter, Clementine, who was posting about the biolabs that were discovered in Ukraine, and it seemed that the attacks from Russia were actually in the locations of those biolabs. After that went viral, Clementine's account got taken down. The listings of those biolabs were actually removed from the US Embassy website. And then Clementine's actually just come back to Twitter now under another name, posting further evidence about that. So I think as soon as people are trying to pull down news, that should raise alarm bells for us. But I won't ignore, Andy, that they would also know that we're familiar with those tactics. And would they be doing that, knowing that we'll go looking for the censored news? More and more people are aware of these particular tactics. Are they doing that on purpose? We can't rule out the possibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting watching it all unfold yet again. And it is concerning that even after 2 years of so much absolute nonsense news and misinformation from mainstream, that people are so quick to just, again, still believe everything straight away. And again, I don't know who's right or wrong in this, and I'm not trying to make that call, but what I am definitely backing you up on is that you need to be looking for both sides of the information and looking a little bit deeper than what currently meets the eye.
You've got a really bad echo, Andy. I don't know if that's showing up for the viewers, but I can hear it, just letting you know.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe a slight echo. Maria, I was going to say, one of the things that you've been so on top of is the globalist agenda and the Great Reset. And I'm wondering, the thing that I haven't quite been able to put my finger on over the last week is, where does this whole conflict fit into that narrative? Is this something that's helping proliferate the globalist agenda, or is this a bit of a bump in the road that they would like to see pushed to the side?
It could be one or the other. So, all right, the World Economic Forum has just removed Putin's profile from their website. So you look him up, you can find him. As soon as you click on his name, it says page cannot be found. So and Putin has been incredibly against the fall that we have seen in moral values, in traditional family values, the attack against religion, all of the things that we see in what a lot of people call a progressive society, which have actually contributed to its downfall. He has been staunchly against, and he's been speaking about this for a very long time. He's also spoken about being against the New World Order. He's removed, people like the Bilderbergs and the control of the banks out of his country quite some time ago. Now, if Putin was really standing against all of these things and standing against the New World Order, then the truth would be that this is a complete propaganda campaign against Russia, because he is a thorn in their side in order for them to come to their goal of the Great Reset. However, the other problem is that we have actors all over the place, and these actors play different roles in their grand theatre leading up to the Great Reset. He very well could be someone that's put there to look like he's standing against it, to make the people think that they have some sort of hope, some sort of resistance, potentially even inciting people towards violence. Now, I've been really thinking about this over the past week in particular, and since the Canada protests. Last year, let me go a step further back. We have a Defence Amendment Bill 2020 in Australia, which allows for foreign troops to come into our country if we're in a state of unrest, or if the people were to rise up in civil disobedience, which I certainly don't encourage. I don't encourage violence, but that bill exists, and that allows foreign troops to come in, and they have full indemnity. They can harm people, they can take down buildings, and no one can hold them accountable for that. They're permitted to do so. I really think that the Great Reset has been such a well thought out plan for decades upon decades, that they have contingency plans for however the people respond. So if the people respond in violence, we'll do this. If the people respond peacefully, we'll do this. So I think last year, when we saw all that police brutality in Australia, and I really think we were the original testing ground for the implementation of the New World Order. Mark McGowan even said Western Australia is an experiment. We are a compliant people. He said it openly. So they tested to see how far they could push us with all of the police brutality, and the people did not rise up in violence. So the next thing that they did in Canada was, well, then we have to get them when they're protesting. Let's create a state of emergency nationally while these people are blocking our roads, which is really only a legislation that should be enacted in a time of war.
Yeah.
So could this be one of their steps to get people to fight against each other and turn against their government? Yes, it could. Or is this the means to get them to the great economic collapse? The other thing that we have to consider is that they want to shut down all global internet. They want, we've got cyber COVID. This could be the way in which they'll do that. There's too much propaganda. There's too much nonsense going on online. Oh, Russia hit Australia with a cyber attack, which, by the way, there's been articles in the mainstream about that. That could be what they use for this cyber attack.
So do you think that the COVID, as you called it, is over? Like we're hearing from some of the political commentators that around the world. I've heard a few people this week say it's over. Now the attention is all on Eastern Europe and what's happening over there. And whilst that is true, the majority of the attention is on Eastern Europe. I think that there's a lot of big election cycles happening, and that politicians are easing the mandates, etc., because of those election cycles. So do you think that it's over, or do you think that that was the testing ground for something bigger to come, or are we still in it?
Well, they've spoken about BA.2 being a variant, potentially a variant of concern. The World Health Organization is looking into it very closely. But what a lot of people don't know is they're meeting on the 1st of March to discuss a global pandemic treaty. This will be an internationally binding document that every single country is bound to by law for the future management of pandemics. Bill Gates has already said that when the next pandemic comes, we're going to be, injecting people every 6 months. I don't think that, and based on what I know, just from experts like Karen Kingston, she's a biotech analyst who's come on with me and actually taken us through the patterns. This is a plan for a never-ending cycle of injections. It's never going to end. And the greater reason for that is because of the transhumanist agenda.
100%. I can tell you one group that doesn't think the pandemic's over, and that's Woolworths. I'm sure you saw the article from Alexandra Marshall. They're actually firing their staff who are unvaccinated even now, as we have many countries around the world who are rolling back all the mandates, including even New York City. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think that big chains like Woolworths were working the whole way through the pandemic for a reason. Why weren't they shut down? Why was a small business on a corner that could essentially manage their social distancing and sanitization of their store a lot better than Woolworths, who's got a lot of traffic coming through? These places didn't stay open accidentally. It was all planned to keep feeding the money into the bigger chains because that's what they want. They want to eliminate small business and even medium business. So yeah, that's why they don't think it's over. They will continue this nonsense. Many of these conglomerates will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you've seen this. You definitely would have seen this, and probably before it started circulating this week. But there was videos of Klaus Schwab talking about Justin Trudeau, however he says it, and some of the cabinets that he's been infiltrating around the world. And it's just, he just makes no bones about it. And just the brazenness of the way he says that our plan is to infiltrate cabinets around the world, and like the president of Argentina and his best mate Trudeau. So who do you think are the politicians around the world? You've got Trudeau, potentially Jacinta Ardern. He said the president of Argentina. Who are the main players in terms of the people who have been genuinely infiltrated by the agenda of the World Economic Forum?
All of them. All of them.
That's terrifying.
Every single one. I think potentially, but there is a potential that Putin hasn't been. Potentially, maybe Trump. I don't know. Purely because these are the people that have been speaking out against exactly what the World Economic Forum stands for. They're against political correctness. They're against that moral decline in society. I don't think that they want people to be transhuman. But I could be wrong. But the rest of them are. I mean, Greg Hunt is part of their young global leaders.
Definitely. And I think that for your everyday person who goes to work from 9 to 5, then comes home and watches Channel 7 News and a bit of The Voice and The Project and whatever else is on TV, they'll hear me say something like that, and they'll hear you say something like that and think tinfoil hat, extremist conspiracy theorists. And whilst conspiracy theorists these days are basically like spoiler alerts, let's be honest. But
yes.
How do you, when you're talking to somebody who isn't in this world whatsoever and who hasn't gone down the rabbit hole, how do you gently nudge someone in the direction of understanding the truth?
You have to find common ground. First and foremost, you have to find common ground. So find out what it is that they're against. Are they against businesses shutting? Are they against the fact that they were forced to go and, well, no one's really forced to get the injection. It's at the end of the day, you have a choice. You have a choice to not work, but I don't think that that's really a choice. Anyway, were they against that? Are they against further injections? Do they know many people who've recovered just fine from this virus and had no issues whatsoever? Do they know anyone who hasn't been injected who's recovered? Asking probing questions like that, where you can actually find common ground, will actually help you. There will always be a portion of people in society who will never wake up. From what Professor Matthias Desmet, who's an expert in mass formation, he tells us that up to 30%, you can't help them. And these people are the people that can commit horrible atrocities like we saw in World War II towards citizens. And you must try and wake up the people in the middle before it gets to that stage.
And it's a tough question because we're so early on in what we're seeing in the Ukraine and Russia. But just to bring it back to that for just a second.
Sure.
I think that people in the age of information are more likely to be on the side of the right side of history. Touch wood, I don't have any wood around me, but I mean, it's hard to say. But what do you think is the right side of history in terms of specifically the Ukraine and Russia debate that's happening at the moment?
I think it's too soon to say. I put out a lot of the information that's censored, which just so happens to be Russian sources. So it looks like I'm fully pro-Russia. Well, I'm pro the right thing. If Putin is really trying to take a stand against the New World Order, then good on him. So he should. Should people suffer as a result of that? Absolutely not. Civilians should never suffer. But should people have suffered for the past 2 years? Should millions of people have been killed and those numbers swept under the rug by the CDC, FDA, our governing health bodies here in Australia and all over the world? No, they shouldn't have. So, I mean, if you consider that was war, and if you consider that this is war, if you're looking at them both as war, what is it? Is it worse for people to suffer while someone is trying to liberate them, or is it worse for someone to suffer while they're being killed by their government?
Right. And I mean, whilst the rest of the world is obviously just all eyes on Ukraine at the moment, whatever's happening in Eastern Europe, some people say it can be a little bit of a distraction as well. And I think that there's a really plausible case for that. So in your day-to-day at the moment, where is Maria Zeee getting her information, and what are you looking at during the day, and what issues are you focusing on?
Oh, I have multiple independent sources that I depend on from all over the world. I also have a couple of people that send me really good information that's checked, and I always check all of my sources or before I post. It doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but I think anyone who's tuned in would know I'm pretty thorough. But I'm also looking at what's happening across the globe while we are all distracted, and yeah, that is happening. So Canada's just introduced a bill S233, if I'm not mistaken. That one is for a universal basic income. They also just had a press release where on mainstream media, not a press release, sorry, a segment on mainstream media where they spoke about potentially paying those who've lost their jobs due to the mandates and not getting the injections, them receiving severance. Well, before I knew about the bill for the UBI, I thought, that looks like conditioning towards UBI to me. And within a few minutes, I realized there's already a bill for it. There's also another bill to stop independent media. And there's also another bill which seeks to charge you with a hate crime, which could mean 12 months imprisonment for having bias.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, Canada is the absolute worst at the moment. And those laws are just, you can't even believe that that's happening in what's meant to be a Western democracy. Are we seeing a test case in Canada for what's eventually going to come to our shores in Australia? Because often the literature within those laws is almost identical with the two countries. And we saw that with the digital identity bill.
Yes, that's what you're seeing now. Canada and Australia have been the testing grounds. And in fact, the M brand, I'm just conscious that we're on YouTube, so I'm going to try not to say the pharma brand names, but the one that starts with M, they openly said that they would be picking Australia and Canada to trial on 6-month-old babies and up. And this is because we are a very compliant people. We have a lot of similarities, Canadians and Australians. What I think we need to be aware of is what we saw previously as part of their tactics, where they've taken one approach in one country and then, a bit later on another country has another approach. That's not going to be the case. If this pandemic treaty is signed by all of the countries with the World Health Organization, what you will see is a much harder, faster approach worldwide. If we thought the lockstep we saw previously was bad, this is going to be infinitely worse.
Yeah, man. And I'm also curious, Maria, how are you doing personally? Do you enjoy doing what you do? Is there a lot of pressure involved in it as well? Or because I mean, I can't imagine the blowback and the sort of messages that you would get and the hate mail and etc.
There's, I try not to pay too much attention to that. It comes with the territory, in terms of the criticism and the hate. And what's disappointing is the assumptions that people come to so quickly. And they could have loved you for 2 years, and then you say one thing that they think, oh, what is she saying? It's, but I mean, that's part of the territory. I don't take offense to it. I think there's an infinitely greater amount of support than there is negativity. And, I'm grateful for that. Certainly. Do I enjoy what I do? Yes, absolutely. And I often say I'm like a dog with a bone. I won't stop until I get to the truth. I won't stop until I know that I've given every single inch of myself towards my part in this. And we all have a different part to play. And I'm grateful for mine.
That's awesome. And I do love the interviews you do. And sometimes I wonder where you get these people from, because they're so like broad ranging and from so many different fields and everything. But I think you've sort of carved out that niche for yourself where you can really talk to a massive range of people. And it's really cool. Now, onto the topic of what we're going to do moving forward, because I think that with these topics, there's a lot of space for nihilism. And there's a lot of space for looking at these issues and being like, too big for me. I'm going to just work my job. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to have my blinkers on. But I think that we're in a time right now, and, the last few years have absolutely proved that to a T, where people can't afford to be apathetic and nihilistic about these issues. This is something that requires an effort from ground zero, from everybody. So I guess what I'm saying is, how do we make a difference in our everyday life moving forward when we feel like these issues are too big for us?
They want you to feel like it's too big. They want you to feel like it's too big of a giant and it can't be tackled. But that's not true. That's just your perception. The reality is that the whole world can be changed with one person who has enough influence, enough commitment, enough dedication. That is the reality. But what about if we have 1 million people with commitment and dedication? What about if we have 5 million people? People often say to me, "Oh, it's too late. It's too far down the plan." And I say, well, if you keep thinking like you thought that way when they mandated the first shot, if you keep thinking like that, it'll always be that way. It's how you see it. So if I've had a conversation today, and believe me, I talk to so many people in person every day. I try. Every single person that I speak to, I try and actually have a conversation about this and talk to them about what's really going on in the world. I had one today. And every single person says, well, what do I do? And I say, you have this conversation with 5 more people and tell them to have this conversation with 5 more people, and stop putting your head in the sand. This isn't going away unless you contribute to it.
That's so true. And there's been so many times in history where chaotic things have come down to the 11th hour. And we saw that with, the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were on the brink of destruction in that time. And right now we're in a different war. It's more of a war of information. It doesn't look the same, and it's uncharted territories for everybody. So I think that it's also important for people to understand that as well. So I guess my question is, in terms of the war that we're seeing at the moment, and I don't mean guns and gulags, how does that look in 2022? I mean, we saw in the 20th century what communism looked like, what fascism looked like. We can read the Gulag Archipelago. We can listen to a bunch of Jordan Peterson and understand what that looks like. But I guess what I'm saying is, how does it look today, and how does one understand what war looks like in 2022?
War in 2022 is the same as war was 2 years ago. It's a war on your mind. It hasn't changed. Their tactics are the same: divide, conquer, confuse. It's the same tactic. It's just that it's the topics changed. Think about it. And I'm already seeing people falling into the same trap of division again. And I think, my goodness, we are smarter than this. We should be smarter than this. But what they're doing right now, I think part of the difference of what they're doing now is it seems to be coming in a lot harder, a lot faster. There are more laws being passed. From the start of this year, there have been more laws passed or introduced than I think we were aware of happening over the past couple of years. And these Canada bills are a perfect example of that. Universal basic income, guys.
Yeah.
This is not a small thing.
Well, that's what socialism looks like in 2022, right? But I guess like another thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that in 2022 we've got war that has this cyber capability, and the fact that Russia has a massive cyber capability. I mean, on par with the USA. Do you think that, I mean, you mentioned before that there's been some sort of cyber attacks on Australia, but do you think that's going to be a massive theme going forward in terms of cyber attacks?
Oh, I'm not aware of huge cyber attacks in Australia. I know that there was one last year that affected South Australian workers, government workers, if I'm not mistaken. But what the mainstream's talking about is the potential of Russia launching a cyber attack on Australia. And what we've seen is there have been government websites hit and brought down. There have been bank websites hit and brought down, news sites, all these types of things. So this is it's either genuine cyber attacks or it's conditioning and getting us ready for that to be our new normal.
And I wanted to float one more thing with you as well. So I guess there's another complicated one, but in today's day and age, we've got the war that's happening in Ukraine at the moment, obviously, and then other big issues that are happening, obviously the globalist agenda and the New World Order. Another big issue that I see is China and their aspirations. And another big issue that I see, and I'm wondering if you share this sentiment, is political correctness in the world and the way that that's playing out. And I'm wondering if you think that in itself is one of the biggest issues in the world, or if you think that falls under the banner of something else.
Absolutely. It's I think that's how this all started. They got us to the point where we were too afraid to call someone their skin color. FYI, if you call me white, I'm not offended because that's the color of my skin, yeah? We were too afraid to call someone a woman. I am not just a birth giver. I am actually a woman biologically, and you can tell that by looking at my genitals. I mean, this is I'm sorry, but it's absolutely ridiculous, and we're at the point where we're too scared to criticize the fact that someone who's biologically a man is winning over a women's swimming team, and we're celebrating that, and this person is perfectly okay with doing that, and no one wants to say, hey, this is wrong. This is actually wrong. These, and there's been such an attack on gender. They've been doing it to children in schools, confusing them from a very young age as, oh, maybe you're not a little boy, maybe you're a hedgehog. No, he's not a hedgehog. He's a human being that was born a man. That's what he is biologically. And just because you think you're a hedgehog, it doesn't make you one. And our schools indoctrinating society like this, and being too afraid to say, someone to say I'm a Muslim or I'm a Christian. Oh, you better not say that. Like, why? Why are we afraid to say that? Why are you afraid to call me white? That's what I am. What's the problem here?
Do you think that the cultural landscape will shift in terms of political correctness now that we have bigger things to worry about and the actual barbarians are at the gate? Or do you think the obfuscation of reality and the truth, do you think the damage is done?
If I have anything to do with it, it's absolutely not done. I mean, I know myself working in corporate that I had to adhere to certain policies and certain ways of addressing people, and it never sat right with me. It never sat right with me. And now I have the opportunity to make that right and really push for that change in society. The way that I see this is that I still believe that we can win. I really, truly do with all my heart. I wouldn't be, I mean, I would still fight because it's just me, but I wouldn't be saying to everyone, yes, we can, if I didn't think that we could, right? My vision is that we would fix all of this nonsense in society, that we wouldn't have this ridiculous narrative that's pushed by this, crazy censorship, cancel culture, that we would go back to being human beings. And you know what, if you offend me, I can say to you, hey, I'm a bit offended by that. And you could respond to me and say, that my opinion still stands. And we can say, and then I can say to you, well, I don't like that, but it doesn't change the fact that I still have respect for you as a person.
Absolutely. And I'm going to hand it over to the boys now, because I've been absolutely hogging all of the questions. But I just want to say thank you very much for answering those. I'm sorry for so many very existential questions at you, but I really appreciate you being such a good sport with it.
It's fine.
You're an absolute greedy man. I've got a few questions, Chris, if you're good to wait. But
yeah, look, quickly, I'm just defending on behalf of all the hedgehogs. I just want to throw that out
there. Bring back the sanity. This is what we need. It's absolutely insane. But on the note of Russia again and Putin, and then of course we've got the big D Trump on the other side. And I wasn't surprised when this came out. He did come out at the start of the week, and I heard an interview where he was saying that he somewhat admires Putin, and that Putin would have wanted to negotiate a resolution, etc. And then it seems that he's come out, he's sort of flipped on that, and he's now on the Ukraine train. What are your thoughts on the flip, and why do you think that's taken place?
I have no idea. I was truly surprised to hear some of his commentary. He was saying that that this was a vicious, I don't know if he used the word vicious attack. I made this mistake last night when I was streaming, but he's essentially called Putin a genius and then come out and condemn the actions. And he did say that we pray for the Ukrainian people. Certainly, we don't want anyone to be harmed who should not have to be harmed. No one wants civilian casualties. No one wants innocent people to die or be hurt. But Trump, he really went with Ukraine against Russia, and I was very surprised by that. And what that did was it really threw a spanner in the works for all of those people who thought that Trump and Putin were working together to bring down the deep state. And you have to ask, okay, was Trump made to say that? Or, is there something else at play here? Everyone kind of always hopes that Trump's going to, tomorrow save the day. Does it have something to do with the Durham investigation, that he had to sort of play the game a little bit longer? Or is he really just one of them? And people will be upset with me for asking those questions. But if you are a fair and honest individual, you have to.
Absolutely. And look, I think only time will tell, but it will definitely be interesting to watch the dynamics between those two, especially because, as we know, they do have a bit of a relationship, and they clearly do respect each other's strength and strategic capabilities. So it will be interesting to watch how that plays out. On the topic of cyber warfare and cyber attacks, I know that for a long time I've heard, and me and Chris have had this conversation so many times, but I've heard constantly about a cyber pandemic and what that would look like and what would happen after that. For people that are watching that don't know much about that, what would a cyber pandemic or a huge cyber attack look like, and what are the negative consequences for us as individuals if that's to take place?
It will be far more devastating than people realize, I think. Klaus Schwab has commented on this, and the World Economic Forum spoke about this in July of 2020, and they said there is a much worse pandemic coming. They call it cyber COVID. You can look it up on their website. It's there for everyone to read. And they say that it will be much faster spreading than COVID, and they will have to. The only way to stop it will be a global shutdown of all electricity, all communication networks, anything that has power, really. And they say that in order to get back on the grid, once they turn it back on, mind you, this includes banks and your money and absolutely everything, yeah. And in order for you to get back on the grid, you will have to be injected. And it will happen in an instant, Andy. So, and people think that this is somewhere far, far away in the future. Well, according to Dr. David Martin, who I recently interviewed, he said they already have the systems in place to literally just flick a switch and do it to the whole world. They conducted a test run last year in November. They did another one earlier this year in Europe. They've already, the one in November, 10 countries took part in that. That was in Israel. And the one in Europe earlier this year, I'm not sure how many countries took part in it, but they did a test run.
So do you think the whole strategy is to scare and overwhelm everyone, put them in a desperate situation where we are so badly wanting to get back on Facebook and message our girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it may be, but then to, of course, give in to the ongoing injections to reintegrate, I guess, into society normally? Is that the play? Is that the objective?
Well, it's part of it. They want to put you in such a state of fear that. But the other thing that they've been doing is testing emergency broadcasting systems, yeah? So when they do this, if they succeed and if they do this, they will, the only form of communication you will have is through the EBS. So that will be one single narrative all over the place. Now you imagine how fearful people will be. They will be desperate for leadership and everyone will be hearing the same message. God knows. God only knows. If you are not mentally prepared for that in that time, you will be deceived.
Very, very intense. And look, I mean, all of these things we're discussing, if you haven't heard this before, it sounds freaking out there. But with everything that we've seen over the last 2 years and all of the theories actually taking place, nothing surprises me anymore. And I think it's something that we need to be aware of for sure. And so, Maria, do you think that then ties into another huge event that people have been talking about, which is the economic crash? And of course, from that point, do you believe that they're wanting to change to completely move us to digital, to wipe out cash from that event taking place? So I guess my question is, do you believe that the economic crash is coming? And if it is being strategically actioned, why are they doing it?
Yes, I do. I recently interviewed former BlackRock portfolio manager, Edward Dowd. He's been in Wall Street, for 25 odd years, and he managed the BlackRock portfolio for 10 of those years. And he says that he is certain that an economic crash is coming. It'll either be this year or next year, but it will come. He says from what he's seeing in Wall Street and the patterns that he's analyzing, the next 4 months in particular are going to be extremely difficult. He doesn't know exactly when the crash is going to happen, but we are expecting it. If they succeed with that, yes, part of the whole strategy is, like I said, the UBI. You will own nothing and you'll be happy. So Schwab plans on wiping out all your debt, but as part of that, you'll also lose your ownership. And you'll depend on them for an income. Now, if you thought that what I've been saying up until now is crazy, wait till you hear the next part, right? They want people living in these smart cities. And, I don't know how, I can't really see at this point when that's going to take place or how they're going to achieve this, but it'll be a really dystopian kind of living in your pods, watching. In order to have anything streamed, you have to constantly be watching it. People wonder, well, how are we going to have an income? How are these big corporations going to have an income if no one's working and we're all getting a UBI, well, that's quite simple, really. There'll be a constant stream of advertising. There's already technology in place. It's called a movie stream, if I'm not mistaken. They're already doing it, where it will only stream while you're watching. So it detects when your eyes are not actually watching the screen and it stops streaming. So this will be so they'll use this technology to make sure that you are watching ads all the time, and controlled by them. I mean, what the enslavement that they want for humanity is disgusting.
It's crazy. It's very, very scary thought. And again, these are things that we have to be aware of, no doubt. On the topic further with the economic crash, do you have an idea, speaking to the BlackRock advisor and some of these other guys that you've spoken to? I know you've interviewed some economists, etc. Have they painted a picture of what this actually will look like for us, even here in Australia? Does it, are we all just going to, is it a huge recession? Is it going to look like a really bad recession? Like, what have they explained that it's going to sort of look like? What do we need to prepare for?
I don't have that answer for you, Andy, unfortunately. Ed Dowd says that he believes cash is a safe option. I don't fully understand economics very well. Martin Armstrong is the other world-renowned economist that I've spoken with. He has a system which is powered by AI, actually, called Socrates. It's his computer system, which has been accurately predicting quite a number of world events, including wars and things like that, ahead of time. He seems to think the Great Reset will fail, but this particular year is going to be shocking in terms of the politics, the faith that people lose in their government, and it is showing a panic cycle. His computer is showing a panic cycle. He can't tell us exactly what that's going to mean, but he says it seems to be driven by politics specifically, which would make sense. We've got elections coming up. We've got this, war. But the other problem is, I mean, the other thing that we have to consider is all of the people that are going to be passing away. There are multiple scientists now coming out and saying that because of there's evidence to suggest that people that have been injected will be a much higher risk of cancer. There's also a huge immunodeficiency problem that's happening to these people, and papers are being published on this right now, proper papers in scientific journals. So this is a depopulation agenda. You've also got to consider how they're going to figure out how to cover that up. There's a lot of additional steps that need to occur before the crash, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of terrifying stuff we've been covering so far, and I think we're also painting a really clear future for what they want. And again, if anyone does think this is too far out, just go ahead and read these books, The Great Reset. Go check out the World Economic Forum. It is all in here laid out, and there's so many people from a wide variety of industries that are all speaking out about this now as well. One thing that I think that we should all bear in mind to sort of give us a bit of hope is they wouldn't need this propaganda and this massive push against us if they had it in the bag, right? So this is not over yet. One thing I'd love to get your thoughts on, Maria, and I know you touched on it a little bit earlier with Jake as well, but what are some steps that we can take? Do you have any thoughts from, or any sort of insights from anyone you've spoken to about what we can do as individuals? Because the other thing that we talked about on the Contrarian podcast, I think it was last night, is the evolution of warfare and how we've moved from warfare going against soldiers and military violence to now moving against less military violence, but more against the civilians with obviously all the information warfare. We are at war, in my opinion anyways, as civilians and citizens. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts if you have any sort of roadmap or any sort of plans of attack for what we can do to start moving taking the fight back to them and moving our way out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. We are at war, and that's not a call to violence in any way, shape, or form. The governments of the world declared war on people when they released a weapon on humanity in the form of an injection. So, it's very rare that I will have a discussion with someone on the street that they won't want to know more information. It's very rare that I'll leave someone just where they're at. I will not leave a discussion with a stranger until I have actually gotten through to that person and convinced them that they could be doing more. So for the people who are already awake, there's a few things. You already have some sort of talent, whatever that may be, whatever your part to play in all of this is. You need to accelerate that. You need to, you may be a politician, you may be a lawyer, you may be a doctor, whatever it is. You need to do more of what you're already doing. If you're aware and you haven't been speaking out, seriously, there's no more time for silence. I talk to people from industries all the time that, particularly the medical industry, who say, I'm too afraid to speak out. And I say, my apologies. I say, yes, I understand that. But you know that people are dying. Yeah. The time for cowardice is long gone. And I'm going to call it what it is. It is cowardice. Everyone, you can't look at yourself and say, I don't know what my future is going to be if I start speaking out, because your silence could cost millions of people their lives. If you can go to sleep knowing that, good on you. I personally couldn't. For the people who are already trying and speaking out and doing as much as they possibly can, find good, credible sources of information to break it down with people on the street and find that common ground. This is a time where people need compassion. And just today I had an interaction with someone who really was shaken by what I'd told them. And they said, I don't know what to do with this information. They believed me. And they said, it's too late. And I said, no, it's not. And they said, well, what can I do? And I said, you can go and have this conversation with 5 more people and tell them to do the same. And everyone must join in on this fight against this tyranny that's been unleashed on humanity. If we don't, our future will be bleak. And I don't say that to put a damper on your night. That's just the reality of it. So everyone must double down.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We just had a comment there saying that you've dropped the mic. So well done there. Just when you were talking there, I just couldn't help but think about the Matrix. And we think about that moment when Neo awakens and emerges out of that pod of goo and all the other stuff. He had that team of people around him who were able to plug him in and download all that information. Do you have any sort of sources of either guides or resources that we can point people towards so that when they do wake up, they're not left with that feeling of shock and awe that you've just described that person has had? Well, maybe we can start downloading some information and they can go up and say that, I know Kung Fu, as Neo says from the Matrix. Do you have any sort of resources like that we can point people towards?
That's a really good question. I don't actually. It's not something that I've focused on, but for the people that are watching that are wondering, what more can I do? Maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe you can create, bite-sized pieces for people who've just woken up to sort of ease them into it before you show them that, they have nanobots in their body. And, send it to me and I'll put it, or whoever, and we can put that on our platforms so that more people can see it. That would be fantastic. If you're sitting around wondering what more could I do, that's a task for you. And this is the point, right? When we allow for that creativity and we allow for people to think outside the box, not everyone's a podcaster, not everyone is a lawyer, not everyone, every single person has different talents. So when we use our creativity to really think, how can we reach humanity in a way that's more effective, beautiful ideas like that come forward. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also it's really important to remember that I think in the military, there's 9 soldiers for every frontline soldier. So there's 9 people in support. And so as long as we all do whatever we can, we'll make our way forward and progress. And I know we're coming to the top of the hour there. I'll just finish with one thing and then let you have a final word as well if you'd like to. And essentially, I just want to leave in a message of hope, right? We've covered a lot of dark topics throughout this podcast, and I was listening to Glenn Beck from The Blaze on the way down here, and he was talking about the fact that his radio show alone, the listeners from his radio show alone, raised $50 million to help get people out of Afghanistan during that disastrous withdrawal. And there's a lot of people out there. I know every time I listen to you, Maria, obviously the guys here and a whole bunch of other people out there, it gives me a lot of hope. There is a lot of people out there who are on our side and who are fighting this good fight. What message of hope can you give to everyone who's watching right now to leave this on a positive note?
Yeah, I have a habit of just presenting, the worst news ever, but it's because this is where it could go. And I want people to know just how serious this is if we don't put a stop to it for two reasons. You need to be mentally prepared for the worst, number one, so that you can prepare yourself. And number two, you know what you're standing against, and it makes you fight even harder for what's right. Do you want to eat bugs out of your pod? No, you don't. Okay, so how can we stop it? Right. So this is why I do it. And again, absolutely, there's hope. We have people from all over the world right now fighting night and day. I mean, some of the people that I speak with overseas, I know some of these people, they barely sleep. They are trying so hard to get the truth out there, to equip others, to fight in court, to try from this angle, that angle. We have politicians in our corner at the moment in Scott Morrison's very party, if we're talking about Australia. But we have people that are in our corner fighting for us here, and thank goodness for those people, because they give us courage, they give us hope. But imagine if we had more and more and more of them. And the beauty about, I don't know if you've ever seen a brand new Christian convert, right? And I can joke about it because I'm a Christian. So you watch a brand new Christian convert, and that's all they talk about. And most of the time, people that don't believe the way that they believe, they don't want to be around them, right? They have this, they just want to keep talking about it, right? So if we imagine these people that have been lied to for 2 years, that all of a sudden come to know the truth, they're going to want people to know. They're not going to want people to be fooled like they were. They will have such a zeal to get the truth out there. It is so crucial to reach more people right now. And I saw a comment earlier from someone saying we need more people. Yes, we do. Because what will happen is the next time that they come and they mandate the next booster, which, by the way, they're already talking about in Victoria. I don't know if you saw Dan's talking about mandating boosters. Correct. Yeah, and Canada said we're going to need to bring mandates back in the fall. So they're already thinking and talking about this. When that happens, and when you have 1 million people saying no, that's one thing. But when you have 10 million people saying, forget it, well, what are you going to do then? When you have 20 million people saying, no, we're not doing this anymore, what are you going to do then? You have a handful of, what are they going to do? Come and hold down 20 million people and inject them? I don't think so. If this can happen all over the world, if people can wake everyone up all over the world and say, we don't want to be transhuman, we don't want to be controlled, we don't want every single aspect of our lives being, strung by Klaus Schwab and co. We don't want this. We don't want this. And it does take effort. And I always say the people who are awake have the hardest job, because they have to show compassion towards people that have hated them for 2 years. They have to show patience. You got to slowly love people through the truth as you wake them up to the hardest parts. And this is the stuff that, that we're talking about now. It's out there. It's really out there stuff. It's to the lay person, it's insane. But every single one of us must do that. And I just know that if people knew the way that they've been lied to, they would feel a sense of injustice, that they feel they have no option, whether it's anger, whether it's hurt, resentment, whatever it is, they have no option but to join in. And you can bring them along the journey with you. Show them my content. This is an Australian platform with world experts. Today, someone said to me, this person said, why aren't these doctors speaking out? She was talking about Dr. Malone. I said, he is speaking out. The news won't listen to him. So, and this isn't, a a plug saying that my platform's the only one where you can go. No, there's plenty, but there are, for an Australian site, it's got the most information from experts around the world who really have dedicated their lives and ruined their careers by speaking out. So tell them about my website. Tell them about where they can go. Try and avoid social media pages that are really, really out there in the beginning. Let them see balanced interviews. Let them see balanced information, balanced articles to begin with. And just tell them that they need to tell everyone. Tell everyone. Like, really triple your efforts now. We must.
I agree 100%. I just want to second what you just said there about going back to your site, but also lay down the challenge from what you said earlier. Those who are watching, take this content, cut it up into clips, especially the parts where Maria's laying out the steps to follow, right? And what we can do. All of you guys who are watching now and in the future, take these clips, spread them around, direct people back to Maria's website, direct them back to other people's websites as well. If you are a meme lord out there, we're going to call on the meme army to get out there and create those memes and share them as well. I think it's spot on. And look, for those of you who are watching, don't just be a passive observer. Sit back and don't just sit back. You want to get back in and get involved. So look, that's all I've got, guys. Andy or Jake, if you want to...
Sure, Andy will give everyone.
Absolutely. And you're right. Education and action is exactly what we need. And Maria, you've been one of those people at the forefront, smashing this out, fighting like a fucking Spartan. I've got to give you that much. You're an absolute warrior, and I love it. So where can we find you? Where is your website? Where can all of our listeners find more of Maria Zeee?
I just saw one of these comments. I tell them to go to Rumble and subscribe to Maria Zeee and Russell Brand.
You're up there. You are top tier with Russell Brand. I love that.
You can find me on Rumble. My channel is Maria Zeee, Zeee. I also have my own website. It is my platform, uncensored. It's not only my content on there, which is, as I just said, interviews with experts all over the world. That's zeemedia.com. You'll remember it. It's 3 E's. There's also a lot from other people who've done, for example, the Unmasked 2030 documentary, statements from Yuval Noah Harari saying that humans are now hackable animals. All of that content's actually there to support the things that I bring forward in my interviews. So do go and check that out on my other interviews page. I've got a Telegram, which is completely uncensored. That's Zeee Media, again, Zeee Media, and Real Maria Zeee on Instagram if you're interested there too.
I love it. If you're watching, I 100% vouch for these interviews. They are phenomenal, and the people are so freaking interesting. As I said before, it blows my mind, some of these people that you found. And I believe you just interviewed a Chinese scientist. Is that correct?
Yeah, her claims are that she escaped the Chinese Communist Party, that she's actually had multiple threats on her life, including from her own husband, who tried to poison her, who ended up being some sort of a, agent. And she claims that they are planning on releasing a hemorrhagic fever. It will have multiple variants. And the reason why she has to continue to speak out is because she wouldn't be able to live with herself if she didn't. She says that the same people, or a similar group to the group that conducted a military exercise prior to the release of COVID, just conducted a similar exercise last year in December. So, these are her claims. I've heard her out. She does have a lot of evidence on her Twitter. So I've included all of that information in the description of the interview, but I suggest everyone watches it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is mind-blowing stuff you're not going to really see anywhere. So, Maria, I want to say a big thank you once again for joining me and the boys, and I love your work. Keep fighting the good fight. We're really proud of what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you, gentlemen, for your questions and your time, and thank you to your audience.
Thank you.